Spain is enduring its worst flooding disaster in decades. After a year's rain fell in a matter of hours, families have been left with nothing. With at least 100 people dead, including one British man, and with dozens more missing, the country has gone into national mourning. So what can be done to pick up the pieces? I'm Faye Barker, and this is What You Need to Know. Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Need to Know. I'm joined now by our Europe editor, James Mates. James, this has been an awful disaster in Spain, the worst in decades, and a tragedy for so many families. You're in Valencia. Just give us a picture of what it's been like there.
Well, I mean, if you can imagine a year's worth of rain falling in about an hour, obviously you can't imagine who possibly could. I mean, the rain was absolutely torrential, and no defences against it were adequate to deal with the amounts of water that came through. It was what's known as a water bomb in many ways. The storms which they have in this part of the world around the Mediterranean, they're well known. They're called DANAs, D-A-N-A, which is a Spanish acronym. And what it refers to is when you get an area at high altitudes of very cold air meeting warm air laden with evaporated water coming in off the Mediterranean, and then it produces these enormous storms. Now, they have them here frequently, particularly in the autumn. They know about them, they think they're ready for them, and this one, they simply weren't.
So for those caught up in it, James, what happened?
Well, about 7 o'clock on Tuesday evenings, what caught people out, interestingly, is that it wasn't raining very much in Valencia and in the Valencian suburbs themselves. Where it was raining incredibly heavily was in the hills and valleys behind. So while they knew that there was a danger and while alerts were going out, people were in no way prepared for what then came, which was this torrent of water, an ocean of water, something more like a tsunami than anything else, coming rushing down the ravines, heading for the sea, and then ripping through these suburbs of Valencia on its way. Now, where we were this morning, there is a ravine, a rambler they call it, which is normally dry. It's built precisely to cope with these torrents of water that come periodically. It's concrete sided, 20, 30 meters wide, 15, 20 meters deep. You would think it could cope with absolutely anything. Well, what happened here was there was so much water that the water level rose to 2 or 3 meters above the sides of this ravine. It swept away 3 of the 4 bridges there, big concrete constructions. It flooded the whole area around. It ripped the concrete sides away from this ravine, leaving just this gaping scar through this affluent suburban area, which we saw this morning. Most of the water has now gone, but what is left in its wake is a sea of mud and debris and wrecked houses, more wrecked cars than I can remember seeing anywhere. And of course, taking with it also, tragically, around about 100 people. The final death toll may not become completely clear for a while because there are a number of people still missing.
And James, extraordinary scenes, and now we've got this rescue operation, a massive cleanup. Around 1,000 soldiers have been drafted into some of those affected areas. What kind of situation are they having to deal with, and can they cope with it?
Well, it's going to take a lot more than 1,000 soldiers. We didn't see very much in the way of government assistance to people this morning, and there were a number of people commenting on that. There is going to have to be a lot of heavy equipment brought in. The mud in many places is anything up to a foot or 30 centimeters deep. It is claggy and cloying. Your feet get stuck in it when you have to walk through it. It's now a warm, sunny day. When it dries, it will set like concrete. It's going to be a massive operation just to get the streets clear and the wrecked cars out of the way, and people, many of whose houses are totally uninhabitable, rehoused, and that's before they start reconstruction of the buildings, the walls, the concrete infrastructure, the railway line that runs through, completely undermined, cars all over it. It's going to be closed for months. So the initial search and rescue, getting people safe and housed and warm and clothed, and then putting their lives back together it's going to be months, years.
You mentioned storms at this time of year aren't unusual, but something on this scale obviously is. Are there real fears this is a result of climate change?
Well, I mean, we were told to expect more frequent and more intense storms as a result of climate change. It's quite clear that what we are seeing is more frequent and more intense storms, but we have seen this happening all over the world, with doing tremendous damage within the developed world and the developing world, and clearly the resilience in Africa and Asia to these hugely more damaging storms is a long way short of what it's going to need to be. What I think we're learning, particularly we've been learning with these very heavy storms that we saw in Germany a few weeks ago, and in Poland, Czech Republic, and then in northern Italy, and now in Spain, all coming one on top of the other, and that's without mentioning what's been happening in Florida with the hurricanes there. What we're having to realize here is that we aren't sufficiently resilient either, nothing close. I mean, as I say, this type of autumnal storm is common here, and they were expecting them, and they think they can cope with them, and they simply can't. And that, I think, we're going to see a lot more of in Europe, particularly around the Mediterranean coast, but equally in Northern Europe as well. We won't be immune. That all of Europe is going to have to look to what is going to be required in order to withstand these much more frequent and much more intense storms, because this was on a scale that they simply have never seen here. This was of an intensity, not just a bit worse. This was a factor of 4 or 5 times worse than anything that has been seen here in living memory.
And the Spanish government now declared 3 days of mourning. So what's happening there? How does this work there?
Well, it is simply a matter of trying to get people get their lives back together again. It's not just Valencia. It's been in Cadiz, in Malaga, in Almeria, basically all along the Mediterranean coast, but also to some extent on the Atlantic coast as well. We've been seeing storms of not quite the same intensity, but of very, very damaging storms. So much of the southern and eastern part of the country has been affected, with huge knock-ons for communications and infrastructure. There's certainly where we've been today, there's almost no cell phone coverage, very little Wi-Fi. That's one of the reasons we've had to come back to the hotel here to broadcast to you today, because we simply couldn't do it from where we were. There was no communication infrastructure left, to all intents and purposes, which presents many of its own problems, of course, and the way that we in our society has come to be totally reliant on that. So the disruption to Spain, it goes way, way further than just Valencia and its suburbs, and this particular, tragically very, very deadly disaster here. But the country is going to have a lot of work to do.
Okay, James Mates, our Europe editor in Valencia, with that. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for listening. And for more on this, do just head over to our website or to ITVX, and do also have a look back through our other quick briefings on a range of headline topics to find out what you need to know. Until next time, thank you for listening.